The build-up to a wedding is an immense undertaking in most cultures worldwide. First, you have to decide to do it. Then you have to find the perfect ring. Next, you need to finally pluck up the courage to ask them. You love them with all of your heart and know it in your bones that they love you too. But still, your nerves flow through you as you scan through all the possible ways they could say no. You ask. They say yes, and the planning of the big day begins. It has its ups and downs, stresses and frustrations. You swing from wanting a bigger wedding, celebrating with all, to a small, intimate affair between you and a specifically chosen few. You have moments where the daunting realization of what you have decided to do comes to light, but ultimately, you are committed to your partner and the wedding day. Now imagine taking this journey leading up to the day of the wedding. Imagine taking your vows and becoming wedded to what you hope to be the rest of your lives. Imagine the joy of it all. Imagine the delight and celebration as you share your first dance. Imagine you got this far, only for it to crumble into tragedy before the night's end. My name is Luke Mordew, and this urban legend is Bride and Seek. Cold feet is a thing that many fear on the day of their wedding, whether it be within themselves or their partner. It is said that 20% of weddings are called off before the ceremony can go ahead. And it is not unheard of for the day to bring those now or never thoughts to the forefront of our restless minds. Those of us who have not experienced the rare but not unheard of occurrence of being left at the altar can only imagine the heartbreak and confusion that the one left behind must feel. It is unimaginable to comprehend the embarrassment of being left so exposed, so publicly in front of friends and family. I imagine you would, quite rightly, require some answers as to why it was left until the last moment before cancelling the wedding. You would need to understand what had changed, what had been said or done that you seemed to have missed. We are all complex, confusing creatures in our own ways, and many factors are included in explaining why these events occur. Sometimes these explanations come, sometimes they don't. But what if your missing spouse could not explain away where they had gone to and why? What if, once they had vanished, they were never seen again? In my telling of the story, Monica and Susie are now merry from their glasses of champagne during their wedding reception. They are tired but excited and ready for the future. The day had been hot and long, although the spirits remained high as the after-party of the wedding continued into the ample space of the living room in the vast mansion they were residing inside. Guests stood in suits and dresses, admiring the artwork and architecture of the beautiful building with their champagne flutes in hand, discussing how beautiful the ceremony had been and how beautiful both of the young brides had looked. The speeches had been both funny and heartwarming. The dinner had gone down well with the guests, and the ceremony had been short and sweet. Both Monica and her new bride Susie couldn't have wished for a better day. Monica was standing beside the table where the alcoholic beverages were kept. A man in a waistcoat and bow tie stood behind it, pouring champagne into the glasses of the guests that gathered to fill up their insides with its warm bubbles. She was talking to her father, the man who had paid for most of the wedding, including the extravagant location they had booked for the next few hours. She thanked him again, giving him a large, warm hug full of love and admiration. He squeezed her back, telling her it was a pleasure, filled with pride and comfort. He pulled her in front of him, resting his hands on her shoulders, smiling ever so slightly as his eyes scanned her beautiful white dress. "You're a beautiful couple, inside and out," he whispered, almost embarrassed to be considered too soppy around their friends and family. His weakness was always his little girl, even now that she had grown to be a married woman. "Where is your bride?" he asked, scanning the room for her face. Susie, in fact, was in the building, but had snuck away from the many faces of the party. She hadn't slept that well the night before, as she was anxious that the day ahead wouldn't go as planned. There was, of course, no reason to think this, but her cautious mind always managed to keep her up. Without Monica there to run her fingers through her hair whilst telling her it was all going to be okay, her anxiety had gotten the better of her. She was overwhelmed with joy that the day had gone so smoothly, and she was extremely grateful to all who had come. But she needed a quiet moment to herself, so she had snuck off up the monumental stairway leading to the second floor, sitting on the steps just out of view from the party, listening to their laughter over the music that played below. Monica stepped out of the bustle and into the large entrance hall of the mansion, taking a deep breath as she looked up at the ceiling. It was here that she noticed the white fabric gently draping over the edge of the stairway above. She smiled, appreciating that they both had clearly needed a moment to breathe. Slowly, she made her way up the stairs until she arrived at her new bride, who sat calmly with her shoes beside her bare feet. Monica sat beside her, placing her arm around Susie, who rested her head on Monica's shoulder. She asked Susie if she was okay, running her fingers through her hair like she always did when giving her a moment of comfort. Susie explained that she was fine and simply wanted to take a moment without her shoes on. Monica smiled, squeezing her tightly before whispering, "You can keep your shoes off if you want to. It's your wedding. You can do what you want." Susie snickered under her breath before giving Monica a gentle, affectionate kiss. "You do need to come back down though," Monica added. "It's nearly time for the games." Susie sighed in an overdramatic fashion, performing the role of a stroppy teenager to emphasize her unhappiness whilst maintaining a playful manner. "I really can't be bothered to play games," she replied, as Monica returned to her feet. "Me neither, but it's a family tradition and my dad paid for this wedding, so we have to," she responded firmly, still smiling. Susie clambered to her feet, grabbing her shoes between her fingers as she rose. "Fine, but I refuse to enjoy it," Susie hissed through a cheeky smile before joining Monica in the walk down the stairs. "I tell you what," Monica suddenly said as a thought shot into her mind. "If I find you within 10 minutes, you have to keep playing games with us. If I can't find you within 10 minutes, you can sit out of every game we play after this." Susie nodded, confident in her ability to hide from the love of her life if necessary, and replied, "Easy." That's a bold statement, Monica smirked, also confident in her ability to search and find any spot Susie may have been hiding amongst. "Ah, here they are," Monica's father called to the room as they both appeared in the doorway. They were now all gathered around him, waiting for the bride's arrival so it could be announced what games were going to be played that night. "The first game of the night will be," he called loudly, pausing for a moment as the room waited with playful anticipation, most merry from the drinks that they had been gulping down throughout the afternoon. He looked back to Monica, giving her a proud smile as he called out, "Hide and seek." The room was filled with a mixture of laughs, grumbles, sighs, and groans. The rules were simple. All those related to Monica were to be the seekers, and all their partners were to hide. And for those that were left, they got to decide who would fall under what. After a few minutes of chatter, drunken organisation, and silly bickering, the countdown had begun. Several party members scurried out of the room as quietly as they could as the remaining group sat with their eyes closed whilst Monica's father loudly counted down from 60. Susie crept up the stairs as fast as she could, now thankful that she had kept her shoes off as her bare feet travelled silently across the posh carpet under her toes. She gripped the shoes tightly in her hands as her little feet paced to the top steps, desperate to win so that she could spend the rest of the night relaxing, even though she had to admit to herself that she was already having some fun. Following her were two others, a man she did not recognize and a woman who was her cousin. They clambered up the stairs far louder than she had moved, much to her frustration as they all reached the landing simultaneously. The man darted up the hall, venturing into a nearby bedroom, scurrying out of sight. Her cousin paced to her right, disappearing into the bathroom and closing the door behind her. Susie contemplated for a moment. This was a big house, but there was a surprisingly small amount of space to hide in. Downstairs, she could hear her father-in-law's voice as he reached 10, 9, 8. She panicked, darting to one bedroom, opening the door. Too easy. She turned to another, trying to open it. Locked. Now she could hear 5, 4. The excitable panic was setting in as she pulled open another door, accepting that it was going to have to do no matter what was behind it. Luckily for her, it led to a small set of stairs leading directly up into the loft space of the mansion. She jumped inside and quietly closed the door as she heard the words, "Ready or not, here we come." She turned, pacing up the stairs with her dainty feet, keeping as quiet as possible, her shoes still dangling from her fingers as she reached the dark, dusty room she was now in. She could feel the powdery-like sensation of the dirt and dust on the bottom of her feet. This room was evidently rarely used, making it a perfect place to hide. She could hear the footsteps of a few seekers running up the stairs on their hunt. She turned, studying the large, grand-looking, wooden oak trunk that sat close to the corner of the room amongst the shadow. She quickly paced towards it, skulking around behind it and crouching as low as she could. The trunk itself was huge, although all Monica would need to do was walk closer to it and she would easily spot Susie's glistening white dress amongst the darkness of the dust. She got back to her feet, contemplating for a moment where else she could go, when the thought occurred to her that she could simply get into the trunk. Monica would never think to look inside, why would she? She placed her shoes on the floor, trying hard not to make a noise as she gripped the trunk roof with her fingers. She pulled hard, using all of her strength to lift the hefty lid. To her surprise, inside was only a pair of curtains, neatly folded at the bottom of the trunk. Her petite frame would fit perfectly. She took the opportunity, pushing her luck as she always did in an attempt to make Monica laugh. She climbed inside, holding the lid above her head with all of her strength as she perched herself into a safe position. Perfect. She slowly began to close the lid, disappearing into the darkness, when she suddenly stopped, remembering that her shoes were still outside of the trunk. There was no point going through the effort of hiding in here if the evidence of her whereabouts was going to be left behind so casually. She sighed and reached out, stretching down with her left hand to grab the shoes, whilst her right hand gripped the lid above her. She got them, pulling them inside, but as she did, her hand gave way, slipping under the weight of the metal and wood above her, and with that, it slammed onto her head, knocking her down into the shadow. With this large thud, the lid slammed shut as the trunk lock slipped back into place, locking her inside. The thud had not gone unnoticed on the floor below, causing several seekers to frantically fling open the doors, moving from room to room, finding the man in the bedroom and the cousin in the shower. Amongst these seekers was Monica, who was both playfully irritated and proud that her wife had managed to hide so well. But as time passed, everyone who had hidden had either been found or had lost interest in hiding. All except Susie. The joke had now subsided, and a growing feeling of frustration was spreading through the room as the party could not fully begin again until she was found. She was one of the main events after all. They called out several times, letting her know that she had won, but she would never call back. They would check the rooms, the kitchens, and the gardens. They had even checked the loft space itself, but no sign of her was ever found. An hour or so had passed, and the frustration had grown to concern. Whispers of Susie sitting alone on the stairs had begun to echo through the room, and the disappearance of her shoes that she was not wearing had been noticed by many watchful eyes, spread to every willing ear with every gossiping tongue. There were hours of denial from the closest to the bride that lasted long after the party was due to end. Eventually, the bride's father took Monica back to their home in his car, while she cried in the seat beside him, confused as to why she would leave so suddenly and in such a cruel manner. using a game of hide and seek as the perfect getaway. The hours passed, the days formed, and the months evolved to years, until it was what would have been just 2 months before their 3rd wedding anniversary. A group of men were now standing in the loft space, emptying old pieces of furniture inside, carrying them down the stairs during a complete overhaul of the building. It was 2 of these men that eventually walked towards that fateful chest, opening up the heavy lid to reveal the decayed corpse of a young woman in a wedding dress, her shoes still resting by her side, and a notable fracture in her skull. The shocked men left the lid open as they jumped back, covering their noses from the smell that still lingered inside this makeshift coffin. It was here that one of the men pointed at the lid, noticing markings of scratches amongst the wood caused by the young bride's fingernails and the heels of her shoe, as she had clearly spent days trying to get out, trying to get anyone to hear her over that quiet week. The men were confused and horrified by what they found, unsure of how this could happen. But one thing they did know was that the sight of the corpse would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Her jaw was wide open, locked in an eternal scream. The woman in white, dressed in her wedding garments for what is considered to be the happiest day of her life, is an image that often appears in scary stories. Perhaps it's the aesthetic of the white veil floating in the shadows that draws horror to its vision. Perhaps it's the extra tragedy its imagery brings, the juxtaposition of the darkness and a dress that symbolizes such a light occasion, not to mention the association with the innocence of virgin white. The tale of Bride and Seek has been told many times over the years, showing itself in various forms and guises through songs, sonnets, books, and films. And although it cannot be said with any certainty that this horrifying tragedy had ever actually occurred in any real sense, there are, as is usually the case, several places claiming it to be a local legend. To many and most, the tale of Bride and Seek sits on the shores of England, expanding elsewhere but sitting more confidently on the grounds of substantial old buildings across our various counties, with numerous old houses in England laying claim to it. Minster Lovell Hall in Oxfordshire, Marwell Hall in Hampshire, Bramshill House, also in Hampshire, Tiverton Castle in Devon, Exton Hall in Rutland, and many more up and down our small but ancient island hold claim to a spirit that roams the halls connected to the tale of the fateful bride. The neighbours of Minster Lovell Hall claim that a wailing figure holding a light flitters in and out of the castle walls and is associated with the bride. This version suggests that the spirit had suffocated on her wedding day after hiding in a classic oak upper body during a game night of hide and seek. Less than 50 miles away are the halls of Bramshill House. Here it is claimed that the spirit known as the White Lady haunts the Flower de Luce chamber that joins the gallery, with some connecting this apparition with the tale of our tragic bride. The earliest occurrence of this story in print can be dated as far back as 1809, now over 200 years ago. It was discovered in a German newspaper, although the name of this publication has been lost amongst the dust of history. The article was titled "A Melancholy Occurrence" and opened with an announcement of a singular and calamitous event. This morbid tale ends with the discovery of a crumbling skeleton in an old, forgotten trunk in which a newlywed bride had inadvertently locked herself inside and miserably perished years before. It would appear again shortly after in the guise of a poem by the English poet Samuel Rogers, entitled Ginevra. This was in his book Italy, published in 1822. It was considered a black comedy, telling the tale of the unfortunate bride, now going by the name of Ginevra. Rogers stated in his notes that the story is, I believe, founded on fact, though the time and place are uncertain. Many old houses lay claim to it. This quote from Samuel Rogers notes that it is fascinating for several reasons. Not only does it prove that this story is one of the oldest depictions of what would later be known as an urban legend, it also shows that even then, its existence had merged with reality, and it had found its feet on the grounds of several locations claiming it to be true. This story appeared again a few years later, spreading its tale further than it had ever reached before, as now it had arrived in the form of a song. The title of this ballad, that appeared in the 1830s, was The Mistletoe Bough, written by T.H. Bailey and Sir Henry Bishop. The song proved popular, and by 1859, its solemn chanting was known to be a national occurrence at Christmas time across England. By 1862, the song was called one of the most popular songs ever written, which must be known by heart by many readers. This legend had gripped the imaginations of England's shores, inspiring further works, including a play by the same name of the song by Charles A. Somerset, first produced in 1835. In 1868, Henry James's The Romance of Certain Old Clothes featured the tale, with Susan Wallace's Ginevra or The Old Oak Chest, A Christmas Story, also covering the tale, published in 1887. Once the existence of moving pictures arrived on our shores, the opportunity to reenact the tale on celluloid did not go amiss. In 1905, a production by the Clarendon Film Company released a version of the story directed by Percy Stowe. Another version was made in 1923 by the British and Colonial Kinematograph Company, and another in 1926 by Cosmopolitan Films. The first of these, created by Percy Stowe, is available to watch now on the BFI player with a new specially commissioned score by Pete Wiggs from the band Saint Etienne. It has been as recent as 2013 that this story was retold when the British novelist Kate Moss reinterpreted the tale in her short story collection titled The Mistletoe Bride and Other Haunting Tales. The story is one that many try to claim as their own, emphasizing our general obsession with the morbid and tragic aspects of life. The story is strange enough to be noteworthy, yet straightforward enough to ring true. Perhaps this is why so many cling to its haunting narrative. It seems that after all this time, the fascinating and haunting tale of the tragic bride is still very much locked away in the attic of our history. If you're still with me, then I know you share the same passion for folklore and urban legends that drives this show. But to keep bringing you these stories, I need your help. Every season comes to life with the incredible support of listeners like you on Patreon. For just £3 a month, less than the price of a small coffee, you can help ensure that this show continues to thrive, with shorter breaks between seasons and even more content available. But that's not all. As a Patreon subscriber, you'll unlock exclusive perks like access to our bonus series, Modern Myths, where we dive into lesser known but equally captivating tales like the Hodag, Black-Eyed Children, the Dark Watchers, and many more. You'll gain instant access to our entire library of bonus content the moment you join, with new chapters coming each season. You'll also get a behind-the-scenes look at how the show is made, discounts on merchandise, and an invitation to our private group chat, where you can connect with me directly and share your love for urban legends with a community of like-minded enthusiasts. Plus, As a special treat, I randomly select patrons to feature in upcoming stories, so you might find yourself becoming part of the very legends we explore. Supporting us on Patreon isn't just about subscribing. It's about joining a team dedicated to preserving and expanding on our collection of folklore. Your contribution directly fuels the research, production, and growth of the show, helping us continue this incredible journey together. So, if you're ready to take the next step and become an integral part of the Urban Legends community, head over to our Patreon page via the link in our show notes and choose the paid subscription. I'm looking forward to seeing you there, where we can keep these tales alive. And now, back to the legend. The legend of Bride and Seek is known under several guises around the world, featuring such titles as The Lost Bride, Bride and Go Seek, Ginevra, The Mistletoe Bow, The Mistletoe Bride, The Bride in the Oak Chest, and The Bride When You Look at the Trunk. The tale evokes such a shiver up our spine as it plays on the natural claustrophobic notion of being buried alive, slowly dying alone in the darkness of an enclosed space. The horror is heightened further by the bride's innocence, it being a playful game on such a joyous occasion. The aspect of a bride, almost always young, is a play on the innocence required to truly feel the dread of the events, made more prominent by the inclusion of hide and seek, a game so often associated with the innocent play of children. Almost every variation begins the same way. A lovely wedding, going well, full of laughter and games. Its horrifying second act is always very much the same, with the bride sneaking off into the loft space, proud of herself for finding such a brilliant hiding spot in the large trunk, only to find herself locked in. The story ventures off into similar but slightly different variants at this point, with some claiming that the lid had slammed shut, causing the lock to fall into place and trapping her inside for good. Others have queried just how likely it is that nobody could have heard her banging against the sides, which can only be assumed would have been the case if she was stuck, desperate for her life. This notion has led to more information being added to the story, with her hitting her head as the lid closed, leaving her unconscious. In this variation, when the bride awakens, the party is left, and the search for her has already halted. An alternative, more graphic, but strangely less horrifying variation is that when the body is finally found, they find her skull has been slightly caved in, meaning that she had died the moment it hit her, or at least moments later. This makes the discovery of her body more graphic and vulgar, adding an extra element of horror. However, in return, it removes the horrifying notion of being alive and trapped inside an unintentional coffin, only feet away from those searching to find you. Perhaps this is why, in this version, an added sentence is mentioned to her discovery, that being of her rotting corpse still holding a slight smile on its face, grinning at her little game of hide and seek. Bride and Seek is full of history and retellings in many formats. Some legends may come and go with haste, but others, like this one, are seemingly here to stay. I have no doubt that the halls of several mansions across the countryside of England will still hold whispers of the mistletoe bow in 100 years' time. The twisted events of her unfortunate demise on what should have been the happiest of days have haunted the minds of the British for hundreds of years. Yet, she still remains, a bride that never truly existed, on a wedding that never really happened, on a day that never came to pass, brought to life by the various stories told in their many guises. I will leave you with a reading of the ballad, written on the subject of this most unfortunate of brides, titled The Ballad of the Mistletoe Bow, written over 180 years ago. Mistletoe hung in the castle hall. The holly branch shone on the old oak wall. And the baron's retainer were blithe and gay, and keeping their Christmas holiday. The baron beheld with a father's pride his beautiful child, young Lovell's bride. While she with her bright eyes seemed to be the star of the goodly company. "I'm weary of dancing now," she cried. "Here tarry a moment, I'll hide. And Lovell, be sure thou'rt first to trace the clue to my secret lurking place." Away she ran, and her friends began each tower to search and each nook to scan. And young Lovell cried, "Oh, where dost thou hide? I'm lonesome without thee, my own dear bride." They sought her in vain, whilst a week passed away, in the highest, the lowest, the loneliest spot. Young Lovell sought wildly, but found her not. And years flew by, and their grief at last was told as a sorrowful tale long past. And when Lovell appeared, the children cried, "See, the old man weeps for his fairy bride." At length an oak chest that had long lain hid was found in the castle. They raised the lid, and a skeleton form lay mouldering there in the bridal wreath of that lady fair. Oh, sad was her fate in sportive jest. She hid from her lord in the old oak chest. It closed with a spring and a dreadful doom. The bride lay clasped in her living tomb.
Urban Legends is researched, written and produced by Luke Mordew. Original score by Billy Jupp, with additional sounds from storyblocks.com. If you like what you heard and want to hear more, click subscribe on your chosen podcast provider and delve into the mysteries of our previous and future chapters. To find more, including merchandise, video content, images and more, visit urbanlegendsfolklore.com. If you have more information or a correction on something mentioned in this chapter, please get in touch through our website. We aim to ensure that all information provided is accurate and up to date, and this remains a top priority. If you want to support the show, receive early access, and have more of a say in what we do, then become a patron by clicking the link in our show notes. For these chapters in video format, simply search Urban Legends Folklore on YouTube. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Threads, and join our Facebook group by searching Urban Legends Folklore.